India's history is like a battlefield, where every king, every empire, and every era leaves behind its own tale. But some stories are shaped not only by swords and wars, but by the battles of hearts and the games of politics. Today, we are going to talk about a story that is not just about war, but about heroism, strategy, and the rise and fall of an empire. This is the story of Vikramaditya, an emperor who faced threats from the Shakas to the Huns and defended his empire with valor. His name is still written in golden letters in Indian history. But have you ever wondered how this great emperor fought against the Shakas and how the Gupta Empire fell? Let's take a look at the events of the time when this empire was fighting for its very existence. Arrival of the Shakas. Let's first talk about the Shakas. These were the people who sent their armies from the western borders of India to challenge the prosperity of the region. The history of the Shakas was ancient, and their military strategies were highly advanced. The primary objective of the Shakas was to capture the rich regions of India to loot its treasures and expand their empire. Their arrival in India created widespread fear. Over time, their influence grew, especially in the western Indian states, where many rulers were forced to submit to them. But in India, there were some brave warriors who were ready to face this invasion, and one of them was Vikramaditya. Vikramaditya was born at a time when the Gupta Empire was at its peak, but internal instability was slowly starting to show. Vikramaditya's stature was so great that his name began to echo not only within his empire, but across the Indian subcontinent. Vikramaditya and the rivalry with the Shakas. As the Shakas' empire expanded in western India, their king Shapur openly challenged Vikramaditya. Vikramaditya gathered his forces. But this war wasn't just about the strength of the army. Strategy played a crucial role as well. Shapur's army was powerful, and Vikramaditya had to face them with his wit. Vikramaditya skillfully surrounded the Shaka army. His leadership and courage had already shown in the previous battles. Initially, Shapur underestimated Vikramaditya, but when the battlefield reached a decisive moment, Shapur realized that for Vikramaditya, war was not won by numbers, but by strategic intelligence. In this battle, Vikramaditya defeated the largest Shaka armies and drove them out of Malwa. This historic victory not only secured his empire, but also established Vikramaditya's power across the Indian subcontinent. From right to victory, Vikramaditya struggled with the Shakas. Vikramaditya, whose name was synonymous with valor and courage, didn't consider his battle with the Shakas merely a defense of his empire. For him, it was a war to protect the dignity and honor of India. It was not just a military struggle, but a battle of intellect, policy, and bravery. And as we know, every major war is filled with hidden moves and twists, and Vikramaditya's story was no different. When the Shakas invaded India, they entered through the western border of the subcontinent. Their army was highly sophisticated, and they possessed formidable warfare skills. They were fierce, fearless, and ready for battle. They were as deadly as they were strategic. The primary goal of the Shakas was to seize India's wealth, and they were willing to go to any lengths to do so. Now, it was Vikramaditya's challenge. His army was small, but his heart was large. Vikramaditya placed strategy and patience at the core of his tactics. He quickly understood that it wouldn't be easy to win this war with just the blade of a sword. The Shakas had overwhelming strength, while Vikramaditya had not just military power, but also the heart and mind to win the battle. Vikramaditya's first move was to lay siege to the Shakas' stronghold. He knew that if the Shakas were defeated on their own soil, it would lead to their downfall. The Shakas' empire stretched mainly from Sindh to Kutch. Vikramaditya divided his forces and adopted a clever approach. He disrupted the Shaka supply lines, which led to a shortage of food and supplies for their army. This move weakened the Shakas both mentally and physically. This struggle was not just military, but also a mental battle. Vikramaditya made the Shakas believe that his army was weak, which is why King Shahpur challenged him, thinking that Vikramaditya's forces were merely a minor hurdle. Shahpur believed it would be an easy war, and with confidence, he prepared to face Vikramaditya's army. But Shahpur had not properly evaluated Vikramaditya's brilliance. Vikramaditya's winning formula, siege and strategy. Every ruler faces their real challenge, and Vikramaditya's was to defend his empire while showing leadership at every step. He presented King Shahpur with a challenge. If you can win this part of India, you will be victorious. But if you lose, it will be your destruction. Shahpur, who had relied solely on the number of soldiers, now found himself mentally trapped. Vikramaditya hid his forces in a camp and shook the confidence of the Shakas. As soon as the Shakas' army crossed into India, Vikramaditya's hidden forces surrounded them. The Shakas quickly realized that the more strength they had, the more Vikramaditya relied on strategy and cunning. Sometimes, the greatest way to win a war is to trap the enemy in their own beliefs. Vikramaditya did exactly that. He planned to siege the Shakas' strongest fort. Shahpur sent his largest army, but Vikramaditya faced them head-on and surrounded them. His forces began overpowering the Shakas at every front. Vikramaditya not only won a military victory, but also captured King Shahpur. Shahpur's defeat proved the greatness of Vikramaditya's strategy and intellect. This war was significant not only from a military standpoint, but also because it restored the glory of the Indian Empire. Vikramaditya didn't just defeat the Shakas, he decimated their army. This victory was not just the defense of the Gupta Empire, but the triumph of Indian self-respect. Stability under Vikramaditya's rule. After this great victory over the Shakas, a new energy surged in Vikramaditya's empire. He took several steps to boost the prosperity of his realm. After defeating the Shakas, Vikramaditya brought peace to the western regions and strengthened ties with the people there. He promoted trade not only within the Indian subcontinent, but also established trade relations with distant lands. Under Vikramaditya, his empire began advancing in technology, art, culture, and science. He encouraged the arts, literature, and sciences within Indian society. His court was not only filled with military heroes, but also with great figures of art and literature. His reign was a golden era in Indian history. But with the growing power of the empire, internal problems also began to surface. Vikramaditya's increasing power brought with it new political pressures. This power often led to internal dissent and opposition, but his foresight and leadership always ensured his victory. The fall of the Gupta Empire, internal rebellions, and external invasions. As Vikramaditya's death approached, internal rebellions began to rise within the Gupta Empire. The rulers who took power after Vikramaditya were not as capable. Slowly, this led the empire toward decline. What once seemed like an invincible empire began to crumble from within.
Meanwhile, after the Shakas, the Huns began to pose a threat to India. The Hu invasion was the final challenge for the Gupta Empire. Their invasion was even more brutal, and they stained India's soil with blood. This was the time when the royal family of the Gupta Empire began to fight for power. Vikramaditya's name was now immortal in Indian history, but his empire silently began to decline. Preview of the next episode, The Arrival of the Huns. After the fall of the Gupta Empire, the invasion of the Huns brought a new disaster to India. They were more savage, more brutal, and ready to claim any territory as their own. The Hu invasion was completely destructive, and it proved to be the final blow to the Gupta Empire. But did the Huns manage to completely destroy India's ancient empire?